So in the last class we had discussed that we did three reactions, right? Which we already covered. Three different types of reactions. You had a metal plus acid reaction that would produce salt plus hydrogen gas. You had a base plus acid reaction that would produce salt plus water, and bases were your metal oxides and metal hydroxides. And we did a carbonate plus acid reaction that would produce salt, water, and carbon dioxide. We learned to balance these equations, and then we moved on towards solubility. And I told you that ionic compounds are basically a bunch of ions all sticking together. And when you stir them with water, what happens is that the ions they dissociate, or which means that they scatter. So ionic compounds dissociate in water. But it depends on the strength of the ionic lattice, like how strongly are they attracted to each other. Like if they're attracted very strongly to each other, that means it's very hard for them to actually split up and dissociate. Uh, so it depended on the strength of the lattice. So if you have greater charge on the ion, or if the ion is smaller, then the attraction would be strong, and it would be very hard to dissociate. So one example was, uh, one of the examples was marble. Like if you have marble, it's not going to dissociate. It's not going to mix with water. So you've got all sorts of ionic compounds, and some mix, some don't mix. So lesser charge, they're going to be more soluble. Greater charge, they're going to be less soluble. And we came up with the solubility table. I told you that there's a list of substances which are soluble, and there's a list of substances which are not soluble. So usme we had I told you that any compound that's made up of group 1, or it contains NH4 plus 1, or it has NO3 minus 1, or it has H plus 1. The H plus 1 is present in all acids. All of these compounds are going to be soluble. They're going to mix in water and they're going to dissociate. All compounds that contain SO4 minus 2 are soluble, except for these 4, 5. Carbonates and phosphates are mostly any compound that contains these two ions. They are mostly not soluble, except for the ones that have group 1 and NH4 plus 1 in them. ये भी सारे soluble थे, except for you have silver ions and Pb2 plus. Oxides and hydroxides were mostly not soluble, so most of them were not soluble, except for the ones that are in group 1, and some of them which are in group 2. Okay, so we did all of that, and we did discuss the solubility of the compounds, some of them. Now, make sure you have, what I can do is I can take a snapshot. Just let me just quickly take a snapshot of this so I can have this open.
Okay, sir.
So I'll just keep this over here and add or start another board. 1 second. Okay, let me just. Okay, let's just keep it there. So we did lots and lots of equations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test out this. I'm going to check the solubility of different compounds and write their states. Okay, I need to. 1 second. We can just paste this in Word. So this is written over here for quick reference. Okay. So I'm going to just and I have this as well. So all the reactions that I've written, I'm just going to write the states. The first compound over here, sodium carbonate. Let's try and write the states. So sodium carbonate. Sodium belongs to group one. What do we know about group one compounds? That all group one compounds are
Are
soluble.
soluble.
Okay, that's the first line. All group anything that has group one that's soluble. So that means this one over here is going to be aqueous. Okay, aqueous means that it's soluble. What about H2SO4? H2SO4 has H plus 1 ions in it. And we talked about all acids. All acids were also soluble.
सर SO4 का भी देखा जाए तो वो भी soluble है. SO4 all are soluble except
हाँ
जो हैं.
ठीक है. So this is soluble. I mean, by default, just remember all acids are soluble. Again, this belongs to group one, so it's going to be aqueous. I say H2O is going to be a liquid and CO2 is going to be a gas. I said, what about this one? Aluminium hydroxide. Is that soluble or not? So if you open this, what is said about hydroxides? They're mostly insoluble.
Insoluble.
Except the group one wale throw is soluble, and the ones that are at the bottom of group two, they are soluble. So
Yes, sir.
this is group three. That means it's insoluble.
Oh, yes, sir.
So it's going to be referred to as a solid. Acids, remember, are soluble. Aluminium sulfate, is that soluble or not?
Sir, insoluble.
What does it say about sulfates? Sulfates are all
Oh, yes, sir.
soluble,
Soluble.
except for these 3-4. Okay, so they are mostly soluble.
सर लेकिन इसके अंदर एल्युमिनियम तो insoluble है.
नहीं, एल्यूमिनियम के बारे में किधर लिखा हुआ है? It doesn't say anything about aluminium.
नहीं सर, इक्वेशन में एल्युमिनियम सल्फेट है ना, इसके
तो
अंदर अगर सल्फेट अगर एक्वस है तो एल्युमिनियम तो insoluble है.
कहाँ लिखा है एल्यूमिनियम इनसॉल्युबल है? सल्फ सल्फेट्स जो है ना, हमारे एल्यूमिनियम मेटल की बात नहीं हो रही. इट्स द कंपाउंड एल्यूमिनियम सल्फेट.
ओह, ओके सर. अच्छा,
ठीक
ओके
है.
सर.
So I mean, this is a compound now. It has aluminium sulfate both in it. Okay, so sulfates are soluble. All sulfates are soluble. Any time when I talk about sulfates, remember negative ion doesn't exist alone. There must be a positive ion next to it. This is just a way to remember the solubility. If sulfates are all soluble except for these four, yani sulfate ke saath, if there was anything, it's going to be soluble.
ओके,
Except for these 4-5.
ठीक है सर.
So which is why this is going to be soluble and this is going to be a liquid. अच्छा, इस पे आ जाते हैं. Calcium oxide. What does it say about calcium oxide? Calcium के बारे में I think it's going to be partial. If we go over here, oxide is this. Mostly insoluble except some in group 2. That includes calcium as well.
यस सर.
So calcium oxide and hydroxides are partially soluble. So what we can write is, where did calcium go? What we can talk about calcium is, I mean, we can think of it as aqueous as well as solid. I mean, it's a mix. I mean, it's partially soluble.
ठीक है.
Achha, HCl acids are all aqueous.
यस सर.
Achha, what about CaCl2? Chlorides के बारे में, what does it say about chlorides? They are mostly, apart from these two, all of
यस सर,
them,
दे आर soluble.
they're soluble. So this is going to be aqueous. This is going to be a liquid. Achha, this one. ये तो पहला वाला तो was already done. Let's try this one. Calcium, the first one, calcium carbonate. What does it say about?
So they are not soluble.
Carbonate के बारे में it says it's not soluble, right? They're mostly not
Yes,
soluble,
sir.
except for the group 1 wale soluble and NH4 plus 1 are soluble. So mostly are insoluble. So this is group 2, so it is insoluble. It's going to be a solid. Phosphoric acid is an acid. It's always going to be aqueous. And calcium phosphate. What does it say about phosphate? It says they're
So not
most
soluble.
not soluble. Except for group 1
Yes, sir. And NH4.
and NH4 plus 1. So this is also going to come out to be a solid. The water is a liquid and CO2 is a
Yes.
gas. And we did lots and lots of equations. इनका कर लेते हैं. Aluminium carbonate. Remember, carbonates are mostly
Not soluble.
not soluble, except for group 1. So there is no group 1 over here.
Yes,
So
sir.
this one is going to be a solid. And nitric acid is obviously aqueous. All acids are aqueous.
Yes, sir.
So whenever you have NO3 in the compound, what does it say about NO3? NO3 के बारे में, whenever you have NO3, they're all soluble, no exceptions.
Yes, sir.
So whenever you see NO3 in a compound, that is going to be aqueous. Water जो है ना, that's a liquid, and CO2 is a gas. ठीक है, ये सारों को clear है? Saneem, is this clear?
ठीक है. Yes, sir.
Nurhan, Amna, Nahil.
Yes.
Achha, so you need to learn how to write the solubilities of compounds. You must know which ones are soluble. This one is a solid, carbonates are insoluble, acids are all aqueous. Whenever you have Cl के बारे में लिखा है, all Cl minus 1, Br minus 1, I minus 1, they're all soluble except for silver and lead. So this one is going to be aqueous. It is going to be dissolved. Water is going to be a liquid, and CO2 is going to be a gas. So
ठीक है.
all of them are going to be, again, carbonates are all insoluble except for group 1s. So this is insoluble, aqueous. This is solid. Phosphates are all insoluble except for group 1.
Yes, sir.
Water is a liquid and CO2 is a,
Mg is in group 2.
हाँ,
Okay, sir.
group 1 की सारी चीजें soluble होती हैं. Carbonates are all insoluble except for group 1.
Okay, sir.
जैसा ये ऊपर carbonate है. Now it's a group 1 carbonate. So now this is aqueous.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, aqueous acids are aqueous. Whenever you see NO3, NO3s are all, but group 1 is all.
Aqueous.
Group 1 is also all soluble.
Okay, sir.
And CO2 is a gas.
Yes.
So now,
सर ये कितने मार्क्स की होती है हमें लेबर आयोनिक का
नहीं,
करने
ये
के लिए?
सारा interlinked होता है.
अच्छा, ओके सर.
I mean, states are important. That's one of the very basic things. Making equations and writing states.
अगर उसमें से अगर 4 इक्वेशन है, अगर 4 हैं, हमने लेबल की 4 और उसमें 3 सही हैं, गलत हैं.
क्या क्या लेबल किए? नहीं,
हमने 3.
वो देख लेते हैं ना कि 3 लेबल्स
अच्छा,
गलत
ओके
सही.
सर.
ठीक है, वो बाद में देखते हैं अभी. क्योंकि अभी तो हम बिल्कुल बेसिक चीज करें. We're trying to make equations.
ठीक है सर.
So now try and make I mean, this is the first equation. Metal plus acid produces salt plus. नहीं, बल्कि let's do carbonate plus acid. And also write down the states as well. So I've got carbonate, potassium carbonate. Everyone start working on this. Case group 1. So I've got potassium carbonate plus phosphoric acid. I mean, first make a balanced equation. Okay, carbonate plus acid produces salt, water, and carbon dioxide. I'm also sharing the board link right at the top. Okay, I'm sending it in the chat over here.
ठीक है सर.
Try and make these equations, but write the states now. This time you have to write the states as well. So make an equation, balance it, and then write the states. If it's soluble, it's aqueous. If it's not soluble, then it's going to be a solid. Iron 3 carbonate plus And I've got so everyone try and make these equations and then send me in 10 minutes. ठीक है? Try and make these
ठीक
equations
है सर.
and also send me balance equations and then send me the states as well written next to them. ठीक है? 10 minutes में try and send this.
ठीक है सर.